Hello, welcome to all of you. I am Professor Prakash Kandpal, teaching at the Center for the Study of Law and Governance, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. It gives me immense pleasure to interact with all of you on the theme New Public Management, Reforming State and Bureaucracy. As we all know that public administration is an evolutionary discipline. It has evolved through various stages in response to the various issues and problems faced by people from time to time. Public administration, this new public management is different from old public management. How this is new from the older one? This is new on the basis of flexibility, on the basis of participatory nature of involvement. It is new on the basis of less hierarchical, less structural. Whereas the older public administration was more structural, more institutional, hierarchical, and bureaucratic. And this new public management is an outcome of the second Minnowbrook Conference, which was held in 1988 at Minnowbrook, USA. This Minnowbrook II conference held in the background of dissatisfaction with the state as it could not respond to the problems being faced by the people in the Western society. So this new public management, which came as an outcome of the second Minnowbrook Conference, tried to respond to the public problems in a more flexible way by involving people in the policy making process with less hierarchical structures and institutions. So we can say this new public management is trying to respond and trying to deliver goods and services to the people in a more easier way, in a more flexible way, in non-structural, non-hierarchical system. Let us define what is new public management. New public management is defined as a new set of experiments in public sector management informed with the market principles of efficiency and economy to make aiding public sector effective. In that way, we can define public administration is trying to respond to the problems of people by involving the market economy, by involving the private players, replaced by the state actors. There are a number of factors which are responsible for the development of new public management. First of all, it is the receding credibility of the state. In the post-1970s or by the early 80s, the state in the West was losing the trust of the people in delivering goods and services to the people, which was expected from the state. Another factor which led to the development of new public management is the emergence of new right philosophy. This new right philosophy is primarily promotes private actors, private economy. It talks about giving more flexibility, autonomy to the consumers, giving them more choices. Another major factor which led to the origin and growth of new public management is post-Wilsonian and post-Weberian concept of state, which rejects the politics-administration dichotomy. Another important factor which led to the growth of new public management is the publication of a significant seminal book by Osborne and Gabler in 1992. The title of this book is Reinventing Government, How the Entrepreneurial Spirit is Transforming the Public Sector. In this book, Osborne and Gabler suggests 10 points how to reinvent, how to re-energize the state to address public issues. Number 1, they suggest for a government which is catalytic. Catalytic means which is more flexible, motivating motivating to the public, to the private sector. They also suggest the government to be community owned by empowering the people rather than serving. Third is competitive government. Then they talk about mission driven government, that the government should be mission driven, mission oriented. Then they talk about result oriented government, customer driven government. Seventh one is enterprising government rather than spending. They talk about anticipatory government, which prevents rather than cure. They also talk about a decentralized government. And the 10th point which they suggested is about promoting the market economy. So on the basis of this background, we can say that there are some salient features of new public management. First, the topmost is it talks about revamping of organizational structures. It talks about flexible structures to serve public interests. It talks about greater autonomy for public sector managers. It talks about empowering people. Albert, a renowned thinker in the field of public administration, talks about 3 kinds of freedoms: exit, voice, and loyalty. That customers should be given a freedom to exit from the service providers if they are not satisfied with the services being provided by the service provider. Second is voice. They must be given a voice to raise against, a voice against the dissatisfied services. Or loyalty, freedom of loyalty. They must be loyal. They should be given a freedom to continue their services from the service provider who are very efficient, economical in addressing or providing their services. Another salient features of new public management is it applies the rigorous performance measurement techniques in public management like total quality management. It talks about counter services. It talks about ensuring citizens charter in all the public institutions. It also talks about debureaucratization. As we all know that Parkinson's laws talks about the increase in the bureaucracy in any organization. So this new public management talks about debureaucratization, means ensuring that all the organizations work on the basis of minimal bureaucratic structures. It talks about cost cutting. It talks about goal orientation. It gives emphasis on managerial support system. Then it also is talking about quasi-market and giving more and more services on the basis of contract. So these were the basic parameters, features, characters of new public management, and this new public management had impacted not only the Western nations. In the post-1990s, but also affected the third world nations. In most of the nations all over the world, the government started reorganizing their structures, and in India also, in the post 1990s, the government of India started downsizing the structure and number of bureaucrats. In almost all the nations, there was a focus on performance-based organizations in the post-1990s. It was the impact and implications of the new public management. Another important, significant implication of the new public management was all over the nations and in India also. The government started giving services on the basis of contract. It started to recruit less and less government servants and giving contract to the private sector. So why? Because it was said that state has failed to provide services to the people in a more economical, in a more efficient way, and the private sector is better equipped to serve the people. Another impact and implications of new public management is in almost all the organizations, public organizations, there was a focus on adoption of private sector style of management, where there is more flexibility, where there is less and less hierarchy. Another implications of NPM is the administration became customer driven. There was a talk of giving more and more service to the customers, and citizens were treated as customers, giving quality services to the consumers. But at the same time, we can say this model or new approach to serve public with a more flexible, with a more quasi-market model of development was highly criticized on a number of grounds. The first and the most important significant criticism which was levied against new public management was that it lacks universal applicability. That means this is a Western originated approach. It is more suited to the requirements of the Western nations, particularly US and UK, or the developed nations. But the third world nations have a different socio-economic, ecological background. They are different from the developed nations. Their problems are different from the US and UK. For example, India. India is totally different in social, economic, political environment if we compare India with UK or USA. How an approach which came into picture to address the issues and problems of the developed nations can be applied universally, as emphasized by the new public management supporters. It is criticized that this approach has no universal applicability. At the same time, it is said that it is a new version, another version of Taylorism. It was called as New Taylorism. What is Taylorism? Taylorism, the approach which was propounded by F.W. Taylor, gives more importance to principles. And he also talks about their universal applicability and totally neglecting the ecological, the social, political background. And at the same time, this Taylorism was highly criticized by the human relations approach, particularly Alton Mayo, that this Taylorism totally neglected the human elements, human values. And it was said that this scientific approach propounded by F.W. Taylor totally neglects human into the organizational setup. So this was this new public management, which is said as a new Taylorist approach, is highly criticized on the basis of rejection, neglection of human values, human nature. Third criticism is, it is said that this is primarily a neoliberal approach and neglecting the background of the third world nations. The neoliberal approach, which promotes the market, which praises the role of the market in public service delivery mechanism, totally neglects the role of the state and the role of the state in serving the needs of the poor and downtrodden sections of the society. Whereas this new public management theory, which is based on neoliberal, which is based on market, purely serves the interest of the rich class and neglects the downtrodden sections of society. It is also criticized for promoting the value of efficiency, economy, effectiveness, but it is criticized for neglecting the values, ethics, justice, and participation. And we all know that in public administration, public is the topmost, should be the topmost priority. And if we don't give respect to public needs, and particularly the downtrodden sections of society, this new public management theory is totally would be out of context. So we can conclude that this new public management is a dynamic approach. This is dynamic in the sense that it tries to reinvent the state and bureaucracy to serve the people in the background of the dissatisfaction which was people were facing with the state. And when the state failed to respond to the needs of the downtrodden sections of society or the common people, this new public management tried to re-energize the state, tried to reinvent the state with a more flexible, less hierarchical and the decentralized management. So this is a kind of dynamism, and this new approach came in this background and helped the state to reinvent itself and try to respond to the public needs and aspirations. It can also be appreciated that it made the public administration accountable to the people, to the public, whereas in the older public administration model, which was more structural, more bureaucratic, the public administration was not responding to the people, was not accountable. This new public management can also be appreciated for being more transparent to the public. All the things are open before public for auditing, for social auditing, whereas in the earlier model of development, earlier model of public administration, the things were kept in a very secret manner. In new public management, the mechanism, the functioning is more flexible, less hierarchical, There is more and more involvement of the people in the policy making process. Not only in the policy making process, but also in the policy implementation as well as in policy evaluation process. So this is more inclusive and it is more dynamic. This new public management, which is primarily based on three values, three E's: economy, efficiency, effectiveness. What we can suggest that in order to make this new public management approach more inclusive, more dynamic, what we can suggest that there should be a harmony of 4 E's. What are 4 E's? These are economy, efficiency, effectiveness, and equity. As we all know, in public administration, equity should be the first priority of any bureaucracy or any administrative setup. Equity means there should be equality in society. There should be no discrimination between rich and poor. And particularly, this equity talks about giving priority to the weaker sections of society, to the downtrodden sections of the society. And in third world nations, as we all know, majority of the population is below the poverty line. So if this new approach, which is trying to reorient, which is trying to reinvent public administration with the values of efficiency, economy, and effectiveness, if we include or give more importance to equity, it will be more effective, it will be more acceptable by society, and it would help to address public problems, public issues in a more better way, in a more dynamic way, and it may have more applicability, more universality as compared to the existing norms, principles of new public management. We have seen that public administration is an evolutionary discipline. It has evolved through different stages in its growth as an academic discipline, and new public administration or the new public management, what is better called and what we have discussed in this lecture, is a more dynamic approach to address public issues and problems. Why it is more dynamic? It is dynamic because it rejects the structures, it rejects the hierarchies which were the main features of the old public administration, where more focus was on structure, bureaucratic institutions, hierarchies, secrecies. This new public management replaces all these weaknesses by being more flexible, more innovative, more decentralized, and by involving the people not only in the policy making process but also in the policy implementation as well as in the policy evaluation process. New public management is also dynamic in the sense that it gives more importance to people, to public needs. It gives more freedom to people to select, to reject, to continue the services from the service providers, either it is state, either it is private sector, private service provider, or the self-help groups or the civil society groups. So in this way, we can say that this new public management is more flexible and trying to respond to the public needs and demands in a better way. It is trying to serve the public needs in a more flexible way, in a more dynamic way. So this is better, far better, and an improved version of the earlier new public administration or the old public administration. This is also dynamic as it keeps in mind the interest of the public, particularly the weaker sections of the society. As we all know that public administration as an academic discipline originated in US in the late 1880s with the seminal article of Woodrow Wilson, The Study of Administration, which was published in the Political Science Quarterly in 1887. And as a discipline, as an academic discipline, the main focus of Woodrow Wilson was to evolve, to develop public administration as an academic discipline to respond to the public needs. And this new public management is trying to serve, trying to do the same or to fulfill the wishes of Woodrow Wilson in a more flexible way, in a far better way, with the help of private sector. Because it has been observed that state as a service provider has failed, and we have seen all over the world there was a lot of dissatisfaction with the functioning of the state. And this new public management has tried to respond to the public needs in a more flexible way. And particularly, it has given importance to 3 E's: economy, effectiveness, and efficiency. But at the same time, we can say giving more importance to economy, effectiveness, and efficiency, neglecting the values in public administration. So in order to make it more comprehensive, inclusive, we can harmonize between 4 E's. What are these 4 E's? That means economy, efficiency, and effectiveness, along with the values of equity. Equity means addressing the public needs and issues and problems, and particularly the weaker sections of society, making the society equal. There, it talks about filling the gap between the rich and the poor. So, by harmonizing these 4 E's, economy, efficiency, effectiveness, and equity, this new public management would become more comprehensive, inclusive to the needs of the people, and particularly to the third world nations where majority of the people lives below the poverty line. To conclude, we can say that public administration has tried to respond from time to time through different approaches, and this new public management is a more refined way. It is trying to reinvent, re-energize the state and bureaucracy to serve the people in a being less hierarchical, being more flexible, and by dynamic institutional mechanisms. We can suggest few readings which are important for this topic. Number 1 is the book written by Osborne and Gabler. The title of their book is Reinventing Government, how the entrepreneurial spirit is transforming the public sector. It was published in 1992 by Edison Wesley publisher. Second book is by Bidu Chakravarti and Prakash Chand. The title of this book is Public Administration in a Globalizing World, published in 2012, and the second edition has just come in 2020, published by SAYS Publications. The third important book on this topic is Public Administration in a Globalizing Era. The writer of this book is Uma Madhuri, published by Orient Black Swan in 2010. Thank you very much.